All right, so I have this question here from Jude, and Jude is asking, there's been this opinion that vulnerability as a man in a relationship is a show of weakness. You should always act tough towards your woman or to your woman. Some people go ahead to say it's better to be vulnerable to your mother and friends than to be vulnerable with your wife or your father. I need clarity and balance on this. Now, this is a good question from Jude, and Jude is asking about vulnerability as it regards men and vulnerability. And it is a very well known fact that when it comes to vulnerability, men have a big issue with being vulnerable. I think, first of all, let's try to define vulnerability as simply as possible, in the simplest term. And what I will regard vulnerability as is your truth, being honest with how you feel and how what you are going through, what you are feeling, what you're thinking. Vulnerability to me is not having any fences around your emotions, your reactions, your feelings. So, vulnerability is your truth, being comfortable enough to be truthful and honest about who you are. But one thing I want us to know is that vulnerability, to be vulnerable, is a reaction, not an action. Vulnerability is a reaction, not an action. And I think it's very important to start here because a lot of people expect vulnerability to be an action. So I see a lot of people say, I need you to be more vulnerable. I see a lot of women tell men, I need you to be more vulnerable with me, more open. Vulnerability is a reaction, not an action. It's very important to have this at the back of our minds. That you do not ask someone to be vulnerable. You allow them to be. Vulnerability is a response to an action. Vulnerability is a response to a feeling of safety. When people feel safe, they automatically become vulnerable. Vulnerability is a reaction to a feeling or an environment of security. When people feel secure, you don't need to tell them to be vulnerable. They just are. It is the reward that people give to you for allowing them to feel safe and secure around you. So vulnerability is not an action. You cannot tell somebody. The fact that you are telling someone to be vulnerable means that you are not giving them what they want. It's a reaction. It's what they give off when you put them in an environment of security and safety. And what does security and safety mean in this context? Security and safety means being understood, being and feeling understood. When people feel understood, they feel safe, they feel secure. When people feel that they are understood and they are seen, they feel safe and secure. and then they let down their guards. When they feel safe, they take off their armor and let down their guard. And this is what we call vulnerability. They become themselves. They unburden. It is totally reactionary. It's a reaction to a conducive environment of safety and security. And understanding, how do you know that? How do people feel understood? What has to happen for people to feel understood? What has to happen for people to feel understood is that they don't feel judged. When people don't feel judged, they feel understood. And when they feel understood, they feel secure and safe. And when they feel secure and safe, they become vulnerable. So you see, if you're dealing with somebody in your life that you feel is not being vulnerable with you, whether as a man or as a woman, or you have a child in your life that is not being vulnerable, they are guarded, seem like they never let their guard down, they're always acting in a particular way, you feel like you don't know them, the worst thing you can tell them is it's okay to be vulnerable with me. It's okay. You don't tell them it's okay. It just means that they don't feel safe. And they don't feel safe because they don't feel understood. And they don't feel understood because they feel judged. And so they put on this armor so that the arrows of judgment don't get to them. You cannot tell someone to stop feeling vulnerable, or to start feeling vulnerable, or to be vulnerable with you. So you see, with this Jude's question, he says, a lot of men are told not to be vulnerable with their fathers or their wives or the females they are romantically involved with. I don't think you need to be told. I think even if you are not told, a lot of people by some default have been trained, and now I say some default, it's not original, but it happens very early on, by some early initiation into a faulty model or a faulty dynamics between them and their fathers, or them and the women in their lives. I've taken up the position of I cannot be vulnerable with this person, being my father or my wife or my girlfriend. People don't feel vulnerable with these people. And I'll tell you why. You see, when it comes to the issue of vulnerability, a lot of it stems from early childhood and from parenting. A lot of it. A lot of it stems from the dynamics of their relationships with their parents while they were very young and way into their adulthood. You see, a lot of guys have learned not to be vulnerable because of the misconception that has been propagated by a lot of fathers that men should be strong. That men should be strong. And strength, strength is a good thing. It is a good thing. But the way we define strength is where the problem lies. A lot of men, a lot of fathers have modeled a life of emotionlessness as strength. A lot of men are living a life of emotionlessness, and they are modeling it to their sons as strength. And what a lot of fathers don't understand is how much their sons look up to them. A lot of fathers don't understand this. They have no concept of how much of a hero your son sees you as his father. If they had this understanding, they would approach parenting in a very different way. But a lot of parents don't have this understanding. No understanding. They are too distracted to see the admiration very early on in the eyes of their children. And so a lot of young men have grown up to believe that to be emotionless is strength, and to show emotion is weakness. Because this has been modeled by their fathers. You see, what I said initially about feeling understood is something a lot of guys do not get from their fathers, or didn't get from their fathers. They never felt understood by their fathers. So when things happened to hurt them, maybe they were playing on the playground in school and somebody pushed them and they hurt themselves, when they told their fathers never empathized. Rather, the father told them to brush it off. You're a boy. Is that why you're crying? Big boys don't cry. Big boys don't cry. Yeah, stop crying. Clean your eyes. Are you crying because of this little thing? Just this little thing that this girl did to you? Or this little boy, is he bigger than you? And there's no empathy. A lot of young boys had no empathy in their time of hurt. Their time of hurt from their father. They felt no empathy. Their hero showed them no empathy. And so they grew up to believe that when you're hurt, you suck it in. You suck it in. Because expressing hurt and pain is a dysfunction for a man. So you see them ask, are you a girl? Are you a girl? Why are you crying? Why are you crying like a little girl? Even your sister is not crying, but you are crying. And so guys have learned to bottle it all up, especially with their fathers. But it's funny how it's the opposite when they approach their mothers, at least most mothers. Most mothers have a way of embracing the child and soothing the hurt. So they ask, where did you get hurt? And they soothe that pain. They embrace the child and make the child feel better, make the son feel better. The son doesn't feel judged for hurting himself. Rather, he feels safe. He feels understood. And for that reason, he's able to be vulnerable with the mother and be himself and bear his heart. He's able to be vulnerable with the mother because his mother seems to understand his pain and doesn't judge him for having pain or for going through pain. The mother doesn't see pain as a weakness or an expression of pain as a weakness, unlike the dad. So you see, nobody needs to tell you not to be vulnerable with your dad. Nobody needs to tell you. It's the dad that positions himself for the son not to be vulnerable. If you have a father that allows himself to understand his son, there is nobody who can tell that son not to be vulnerable with the dad. Nobody. Nobody can indoctrinate you into a life of being distant from your dad, of being closed to your dad, if your dad positions himself in a place of safety and understanding towards you. Nobody can do that. So the question is not who tells you not to be vulnerable with your dad. The question is how has your dad positioned himself? If a dad positioned himself as a pillar of safety and security and understanding without judgment, you will be vulnerable with him. You will be yourself with him. You'll be open to him. A lot of parents try to correct in their offspring, especially the ones of the same gender, the errors that they think or they seem to have committed in their own lives. So fathers are harder on sons because of errors that they think that they made when they were young men, and they don't want their sons to make those errors, or errors that they're even making as adult men. And they're like, oh, I wish I could just stand up to my boss at work. He intimidates me so much. And then the son comes and says a classmate is intimidating him in school. And then he gets offended that this is happening to me and happening to my son too. And he tells the son, how can you allow somebody in your class intimidate you? Are you not a man? In actual fact, this father is not talking to the son, he's talking to himself. He's addressing his own deep insecurities. But then he's projecting it towards the son. Are you not a man? Can't you fight for yourself? Is that why you're crying? Because deep inside him is crying too whenever his boss seems to oppress him at work. So it's harder on the son. Because in him, in the son, he sees a reflection of himself. And he tries his best to make sure his son doesn't end up like him. Because he sees himself as weak. And so when the son says he's feeling pain, he feels hurt, someone pushed him on the playground, he's like, please don't turn out weak like me. And because of that, there is no empathy. A lot of men have no patience with their sons when they're not doing things that they feel might be financially rewarding. They're like, what's this thing you're doing as a man? What are you following passion for? Nobody follows passion. Go out and get money. Women can follow passion. Men are not made to follow passion. Your wife will not love you. Your wife would not love you if you are out following your passion and not making money. Make money first. Passion doesn't matter. So men grow up with insecurities, feeling that the only love language that women know is money. She loves me because I provide. She loves me because I bring home the bag. If I told her that I'm having financial challenges, she will stop loving me. Then what do? I will lose her. So I must never let her know what I'm going through financially. I would rather unalive myself than look my wife in the eye and tell her I am broke. Because my father has mentored me to know that women can never love me without the strength of money. I believe that vulnerability can only happen in a place of safety, and people only feel safe when they feel understood. And understanding can only happen when we don't judge. Young men, take time to listen to your sons. It's okay for a young man to cry. Stop telling young boys that big boys don't cry. You are damaging them. Stop telling young boys that nobody will appreciate you and nobody would accept you if you are not rich. These things are doing more to break young men than to build them. Vulnerability can only be built in a place of security and safety. And safety only comes from understanding. And understanding only comes from not being judged.